It just wouldn't be a motorcycle engine without the clutch. Welcome to Hacker Week. As promised, this week we're going to get into the clutch. We'll take it apart and measure the thickness of the discs, and then we'll put the clutch cover back on and get the clutch release lever in place. Let's get started. Now we're over here on the clutch side. We're going to remove the clutch release plate and inspect the clutch. I don't know what kind of shape it's in, and after looking back on what happened with that oil pump, I think it's probably worth my while to take a look at this clutch as well. Let's slide that off and we'll set that aside. Well, let's take a look at this bearing here. That feels really good. I don't feel any weird spots in it, so that looks like that's okay. Let's pull these springs out. We'll set those aside right with the release plate. Now there's a special tool that you need to take this off, and that's what allows you to get the clutch, the whole clutch assembly out. I don't have that tool. Well, as I said, I don't have that tool, but let's see. Let me measure what the span is across there. It's a pretty simple tool. It's just got 4 points to it. It measures 23.3 millimeters. And I've got some old sockets kicking around here. Here's a 7/8 socket, and it's a 12 point. If I measure in there, it looks like 2 of the points on here are exactly the right size to fit on that dimension. And being as this is a 12 point, I can go those 2 and those 2, keep those on there. And if I get out my angle grinder with a cutoff wheel and just cut away everything I don't need on here, I think I can make a tool for that. Okay, I got the socket marked out. Those white marks are what are going to be left behind, and then the edges, if I just cut along those lines with my 4.5 inch grinder cutoff wheel, take away that area, I should have a tool that'll work for this. Okay, there it is. Couldn't quite cut through all the way on this stuff, but I think I can just break it away. Yep. So we'll break those pieces off. And there it is. Let's see if it fits. Okay, here goes. Moment of truth. Wow. How cool is that? It fits perfect. Before I spin that off, though, I need to pry one of these little tabs away. Right there is a little tab that's bent in place to hold this from loosening up. So I've got to knock that back, bend it back out of the way, and then I can get that off. I've got a little center punch here that might work. Yep, that gets it started okay. Just take a small punch and knock that back the rest of the way. If I put the tool on there and try to loosen this, everything turns. So there's another tool, I guess, that can lock this down. So I'm going to have to get a little resourceful here, but resourceful I can get. This is a tool that I made for a Jaguar XK8 to lock down the crankshaft. This replaced a $400 tool. It's another tool I built for that. If I put this in here and let it hit against that flange and that flange with these bolts, and then I still have access through here, I think I can get this to work. Got just enough room to get that in there. So let's see, I'm going to have to push against this as I do this. This bolt torques back up to 36 foot-pounds. There it goes. I just love it when I build a tool to get the job done. Way more satisfying than parting with the cash and waiting for it to come after you order it. So let's take that off. Now there is a chamfered edge to this thing that goes toward the clutch. Make sure you put it back in the right way. I'm going to lay that on the bench. I'm going to pull off the little washer. I'm going to put that on the bench. Here is a thrust washer. Now that actually has a dished side to it. Can you see that? It's got a little bit of an angle on this side. It's a thrust washer. Make sure that goes the right way. It should have the slant part pointing out. So it's, in other words, it's tilted like that. That tilt part should point out towards you when you put it back together. And now all of this can come out, and this holds all of the clutch discs. There we go. Now what we can do is measure the thickness of these discs and make sure they're all within spec. Let's go ahead and pull this off. I'm just going to go ahead and take off one of the discs from the back side here. There's a metal ring, and then there's the actual friction disc. These look really good, but let me clean this off with a rag, and we're going to measure the thickness of it. And according to the book, if it's less than 3.1 millimeters, it's time to replace it. Make sure we're at 3.46. So these aren't too bad. They've got some wear left on them. I think we'll just leave them alone for now and probably replace them at some point, maybe later after a season of riding. So let's get that all back together now. And when you put these back together, make sure that they're all lined up along the edge here. And we're going to drop this back in. Okay, make sure you keep all of the tabs lined up with the slots in the clutch holder. Slide it all back on until it goes all the way home. Thrust washer goes on next. It's dished like this. The concave side goes towards the engine. We'll put the locking tab back on. Make sure it's lined up on its little locking lug. We'll put the special nut back on. We'll spin that down. And we'll get out a torque wrench and torque that up to 36 foot-pounds. Okay. See where the tab's lined up. Perfect. I can bend that tab up to lock it in right there. See if I can get in there with a hook tool. Now we'll just get after it with a flat blade screwdriver. Pry it over. Looks like it just makes it there. We'll get it the rest of the way with a small punch. That's that. Now we can go ahead and put the release plate back on. Springs go back on first. We get the plate back up there. Get all 4 bolts started. Now we'll run those in nice and even. I'm going to use my impact driver here to speed up the process. And do a final torque of 9 foot-pounds. Here's a close-up of that tool again. Just remember, you need a 7/8 12-point socket. and cut it just like that, and that'll work. That's a replacement for that special Honda tool. That's what Hack-A-Week's all about. Hacking stuff. So that takes care of the clutch. Now we've got the clutch cover. Clutch cover has two seals on it. One for the release lever and the other one for the kickstarter, which runs through here. So we need to get those two seals out. You can use a hooked seal puller, or you can just use a flat blade screwdriver and get in there and pry them out just like that. And we'll clean this all up now. Scrape away any of the gasket material that's still left on the back. There is an alignment dowel right there on this one. So let's get to work cleaning that off. And a final rinse. Now we can get the two seals in. The one that goes in the center is this part number. Let's get that one in there. You should press right in really easy. Take a dead blow hammer and tap that in the rest of the way. And the one over here on the Kickstarter, there is the part number for that one. That's that. Here's the clutch lifter assembly, and this is how this works. This locks into the plate that we just saw down there in the bench, and then this portion right here gets a lever on it, and it rotates when you pull on the clutch cable. And then what happens is it rides up on these ball bearings in here, and you see what happens, how the dimension changes, and then this part pushes on that center portion of the clutch and disengages the way that those discs are getting pushed together by the springs. So the first part we're going to put on here is this plate. This locks into this cover plate right here. We'll make sure that's all cleaned of any crud. It looks really good. There's a pin here that drops into a hole, so let's put that in there. Okay, I'm going to put a little bit of grease on that just to help it out a little bit before it gets a little bit of lube once the engine's running and everything. Just put a little bit there. And then the ball bearing assembly goes on next. We'll put that on there. Now the lifter portion would go in, but before we do that, we're going to unscrew the adjuster here. This is the peg that pushes on that center of the clutch and does the work. Inside here, there's an O-ring right there, and that's sealing you off from any oil that could potentially leak out to the outside where that lever is. I've got a new O-ring for that, so let's put that on. There's the new part number for that O-ring. We'll cut that open. We'll get the O-ring out. Now let's put the O-ring on and just slide it down over there. It's a pretty tight fit. Okay, now that's on there. Now we can put that back into here. Put the threads in first. We'll spin that on. And we're going to take a flat blade screwdriver over on this side, and we'll just back this way out. Take it out as far as you can. Now that portion will go through, and the seal that I put on seals right around here. You can see some of the wear from the old seal on there. So once again, a little bit of assembly lube is a good call on the inside of that seal. We'll put a little bit here as well, and a little bit on the place where the ball bearings are going to ride. We'll drop that in. Give it a little wiggle so it can get through the seal okay. And there it is over on that side. Let's get some lube on that seal while we're right here with the assembly lube. That's for the Kickstarter. Now we can put some gasket sealer on there, get the gasket in place, and we'll put it on the engine. Before we put that on, I've got to clean this up. This is the Kickstarter shaft. It got a little rusty sitting here in the workshop a couple of times when some condensation formed on everything and caused a lot of rust. So I'll clean that off with a little bit of 400 grit paper and then polish it up with some crocus cloth. There we go, much better. Got some gasket material on there. There's one alignment dowel stuck in the side. There's another one on the case that stayed in the case. We've got the gasket on there. We'll put a little more of the stuff on the other side too. Okay, we're ready to put this on. Let's get the shaft lined up first. Everything's good inside there. Oops. Make sure we stay lined up with the alignment dowels. There we go. Now we've got bolts that go around the outside edge here, and they are of different lengths. Once again, I use the parts breakdown to get the bolt length sizes all worked out. I've got those all set aside, and we'll put those in now. We'll run those in until they bottom out. Snug them up. And torque to 9 foot-pounds. Now we can put the clutch release lever on to the lifter. I should have mentioned in the previous scene, make sure that when you put that lifter in, the flats are set up so that the lever points toward the bottom of the engine like that. If you've got it wrong, you'll probably have to pull the cover back off, rotate it in the right position, and put it on there that way. So anyway, this goes on like that. The lever has a bend to it that points towards the crankcase. A washer goes on next, and we'll take that adjuster and we'll run it in until it just bottoms out, and then we'll back it off about a quarter turn. Now there's a nut that goes on, and that locks it in place. We'll leave it like that for now. Later, that's where you adjust the clutch. You want a little bit of free play in it, and that's where it will be adjusted, and the lock nut holds that adjustment in place. There's a spring that goes on. One end hooks right here on the release lever. The other end fits over that peg. And what keeps that from popping off that peg is the cover plate that will go on later. That's held on with 3 countersink screws, and that part right there actually bumps against that pin, so the spring can't come off. And that's how that goes. But we'll leave that off for now. So that takes care of the clutch. What do you think, Figaro? They do a good job? Figaro approves of the clutch. So does Seamus. He's cruising around in here. It's cold outside. The cats are hanging out with me in the garage tonight. Well, I got the clutch in, and not only that, I made a pretty cool little tool here and saved myself the time and money looking for that thing online. You can get pretty resourceful when you put your mind to it and problem solve, and a lot of times you can build your own special tools if you really work at it. So the clutch is done. We're just about finished. We have to just put a few more things on here to plug up some holes where oil can come out. Going to put the oil filter on next time. We're going to get the oil lines connected. We're going to put the tank on. We're going to put some oil in it. hook up a pressure gauge right here where the oil pressure switch goes, and we're going to crank it over and see what kind of oil pressure we get and make sure the top end is getting lubricated. We'll just put 12 volts on that starter and give it a bunch of cranks until we get oil pumping all over everything. Till next time, Figaro and I, well, you know. Hey, buddy. What up, Figaro? Well, Figaro likes the engine. It's kind of same color as he is. Anyway, that was quite a